My name is Harper Linwood. I hadn't returned to Valemont in 3 years, and frankly, I wasn't planning to return. But when your father dies and leaves a handwritten letter with your name on it, even after you stopped speaking to most of the family, you go. I drove 12 hours straight from Denver through sleet, 2 cups of gas station, coffee, and enough silence to forget what my voice sounded like. When I finally rolled into Valemont, Nebraska population smug, the first thing I noticed was how little had changed. Same American flags on porches, same rusting welcome sign, same judgment behind every curtain. The Linwood name still meant something here. Mostly thanks to my father, Walter Linwood. Decorated Marine. 3 tours. Owned the town's hardware store. Loved by everyone. Well, almost everyone. I was the exception. I parked 2 blocks from the town civic center where the ceremony was held. The local paper said it was a special memorial honoring the contributions of one of Valemont's most respected military families. Guess which member of the family they didn't name? I checked my coat in the rearview mirror, ran a brush through my hair, and reached for the letter my father had written just before he passed. Still sealed. Still heavy. Like it had its pulse. The walk toward the entrance was longer than it should have been, maybe because every step brought a memory. The time Dad taught me how to salute right on this sidewalk. The time Mom made Colette pose with her JROTC medal while pretending I wasn't alive. And there she was, Colette Linwood. Her face was plastered across the event banner, honoring Lieutenant Commander Colette Linwood and the Linwood legacy. I stared at the print, wondering if it might rearrange and include my name. Spoiler, it didn't. I held the envelope a little tighter and walked up the stairs. Inside, the lobby was packed. Suits, uniforms, pearls, name tags. Everyone looked like they were here to be seen. A young woman in a crisp red blazer stood behind the registration table. She smiled how customer service people smile when they've already decided they hate you. Name? She asked. Harper Linwood. She scrolled. Then again. Her smile shrank. I'm sorry. You're not on the list. I waited for a, let me double check, or maybe it was a mistake. What I got was silence. I'm her sister, I said, nodding toward the poster with Colette's face on it. She looked uncomfortable. I was instructed to only admit registered guests. I'm really sorry. Sure you are. I stepped aside to let the next perfectly coiffed guest check in. That's when I heard it. Is that Harper Linwood? A woman whispered it like I was a ghost who hadn't been invited to my funeral. Didn't she get discharged? Quietly? The other voice. You mean dishonorably? That's what I heard. Real shame. I could have turned around. I could have corrected them. But they weren't talking to me. They weren't even curious. They already had their version. And let's be honest, truth never mattered much in this town unless it came with a plaque and a pie. So I stood there, alone in a hallway full of people who used to pat my head and tell me how proud they were of Walter's tough little girl. Now, they wouldn't even make eye contact. It was humiliating, sure. But it's also kind of funny. The kind of funny where you laugh because if you don't, you'll punch something. My favorite part? A laminated display on a side table. The Linwood women. Strength through service. Photos of Mom, Colette, and even Great Aunt Cheryl in her nursing uniform during Desert Storm. But not me. 2 years in uniform and a combat tour don't count if you don't smile for the photo op. You ever have one of those moments where you think, wow, they want me gone? Yeah, that was mine. But I didn't leave. I took a deep breath, looked around again, and walked back out the door. And before I keep going, tell me this: have you ever been erased by your own family? Drop it in the comments, and if you're watching, subscribe. We're just getting started. It was colder outside than I remembered. Nebraska cold can slip into your bones even if wrapped in wool. I crossed the street and leaned against the hood of my rental car, the letters still in my hand, wondering what the hell I'd even come back for. Then I looked up and that's when I saw it. I didn't move when the black SUV pulled up across the street. I kept my eyes on the windshield, the letters still in my hand, fingers stiff from the cold. The SUV parked, engine idling. Then, a man stepped out, wearing a pressed uniform with medals that caught the afternoon light. He looked around, didn't see who he was looking for, and got back in. Doors locked. Whoever he wasn't here for me. No one was. I thought about returning to the car, turning around, and driving straight back to Denver with silence and a wasted gas tank. But I didn't. Not because of pride or some noble reason. Just stubbornness. Back inside, people were being ushered into the main hall. The oversized double doors opened, and banners, flags, and the town mayor were already at the podium. The sign behind her read, Valemount Honors Commander Colette Linwood. A lifetime of service. I stepped up to the registration desk again. Same woman. Still no warmth in her face. I just want to sit in the back, I said. I'm not here to cause trouble. I understand, she said. But if your name isn't on the list. I'm her sister, I said again, slower this time. We grew up 2 miles from here. I bled on this town sidewalk like every other Linwood kid. Her eyes flicked to the list again, just for show. I'm really sorry. I laughed under my breath. Of course, you are. That's when 2 older women walked past in fur-trimmed coats, pearls, and judgment. One of them looked straight at me. Well, I guess they'll let just anyone loiter in the lobby these days. I turned to face her. You used to babysit me, Carol. She blinked, then turned away. Colette's voice came through the speakers. She was mic'd up, already on stage, already being introduced like she invented the flag. The audience applauded. I stood at the doors, watching as the crowd filtered in. Faces I hadn't seen in years. Faces that used to sit in our kitchen eating Dad's meatloaf. My Uncle Henry was singing in the center, laughing at something the guy beside him said. My mother sat in the front row, in perfect posture, her hands folded like she was on camera. But no chair for me. I tried walking through. A security guy stepped in. He wasn't aggressive. Just there. Like a wall that had memorized the guest list. Name, he asked. Harper Linwood. He didn't even pretend to check. You're not on the list, ma'am. Of course I'm not. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the entryway. Sure, I said. Wouldn't want to upset the tribute to family values. I stepped aside again. A woman nearby gave me a once-over, then leaned to her husband and whispered something behind her program. I caught the words embarrassment and ungrateful. I wanted to yell. I wanted to burn the whole ceremony down with the truth I was carrying in my coat pocket. Instead, I walked toward the side hallway, where the noise faded and the smell of coffee from the staff break room leaked through the vents. I stood there, alone, my back against the cold cement wall. I stared down at the envelope again. Dad's handwriting was messy. He'd always been a scribbler. A Marine who never learned to print correctly and never tried. I thought about opening it right then, right there. But it felt wrong, not because of the people in the room, but because of what I knew it might say. I wasn't ready for answers. Not yet. Footsteps approached. I expected someone to tell me to leave again. Instead, a janitor passed by, pushing a mop bucket. He glanced at me, then at the badge still clipped to his hip. You're Linwood's kid, ain't you? Yeah. Thought so. He kept pushing the mop and paused. They always did act like she walked on water. He meant Colette. He didn't need to say it. She walked on something, I muttered. The janitor laughed. It was the first time someone did. He kept moving. I stood there, coat still on, hands cold, the letter burning a hole in my palm. I could hear the audience clapping again, probably for another speech, another slideshow of Colette shaking hands with someone important. I didn't go back in. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I just walked outside again, into the bitter wind, and kept walking toward the parking lot, not looking at the SUV across the street, not even realizing the man inside had gotten out again this time, walking straight toward me. My boots crunched against the gravel as I stopped because he looked straight at me like he knew exactly who I was. He wore the kind of posture that made other men straighten theirs. Tall, square shoulders, cap in his hand, bars on his chest. A career military man, maybe in the late 50s, his face was hard to read, like he'd seen 1,000 ceremonies like this and never liked any of them. "You're Harper Linwood?" he asked. Voice steady, not warm, not cold. I nodded slowly. "Yeah." He didn't introduce himself. Just said, "You're not going in?" Apparently, I'm not on the list. He looked at me for a beat, like that answered more questions than it should have. Then he glanced back toward the building. The front doors had closed again. The echo of applause had faded. He looked tired and slightly annoyed. "I came here to find you," he said. I frowned. "Do I know you?" "Number. But I knew your father." That stopped me. The wind suddenly felt colder. "You served with him?" "I served under him. First Gulf. He saved my ass more than once." I looked at him for a long second. "Then you should know he's dead." His mouth tensed. "I do." We stood in silence. Somewhere down the block, a flag flapped in the wind above a war memorial no one under 40 could name. The man watched me like he was debating something, then nodded to himself. "You got a minute?" "I'm not exactly busy." He motioned toward the back of the building. We walked, neither of us speaking. Behind the main hall was a small courtyard, quiet, benches, brick walls, and a fountain that hadn't worked in years. I sat. He stayed standing. "Your father wrote me before he passed," he said. "Said you might show up today. Told me if you did, to look out for you." That's a hell of a message. He finally introduced himself. "General Maxwell Dean. Retired." I blinked. The name wasn't unfamiliar. I'd read it more than once in briefing memos and after-action reports. This man had made things happen. The kind of guy whose name moved the paper up the chain faster than a fire. "Why would my father ask you to look out for me?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he asked, "You still active duty?" I shook my head. "Discharged 2 years ago." "Voluntary?" I hesitated. "Technically." His eyes narrowed slightly. He knew what that meant. "People here don't seem thrilled to see you," he said. "Small towns have long memories. They also have loud mouths." That made me smile, bitter and fast. "Let me guess," he said. "You made the mistake of being better than your sister, but in the wrong way." "That obvious?" "It always is." The general sat down finally, careful with his knees like they'd seen too many desert miles. He leaned forward, elbows on his thighs. "I heard what happened at the door," he said. "Oh good, word spreads fast." Someone live-streamed the opening remarks. "You were in the frame. People noticed the uniform coat, then noticed you got turned away." I shook my head. "Should have worn a trash bag. Would have blended in better." "You served honorably," he said, firm. "Your record's clean." That's funny. Because in this town, I'm the scandal. "I know. I heard things, too." He looked at me sideways. "You want to hear what they're saying?" "Number." He told me anyway. "She got sent home in disgrace. She broke protocol. She left the military because she couldn't hack it. She embarrassed her family. They were proud of Colette. Harper? Not so much." I stared at the fountain's dry base. My jaw clenched. "I've heard worse," I said. "I believe you," he replied. The wind picked up. I pulled my coat tighter. "They don't know what happened," he said. "They don't want to know. They've got their version of the story and it's convenient." "Yeah, it always is." General Dean's voice dropped slightly. "But your dad knew. Every detail. He asked me to make sure someone else did too." I turned to him. "Why?" "Because he thought one day, when you were ready, the truth should be heard by someone who mattered." "And you matter?" "I outrank half the room and scare the other half. So yeah, I matter." He stood again. "You're not done here, Harper." "Not yet." He walked away without waiting for a response. I didn't stand up right away. I just sat there, letting the cold bench dig into my spine while the sound of applause rolled faintly through the brick walls. My hands were still in my coat pockets, fingers curled around the crumpled envelope I hadn't planned on bringing. It had been in my glove compartment since Dad's funeral. A single page, sealed with old-school wax like he thought he was in some kind of spy novel. His handwriting on the front, to be read by Harper, only if she goes back. Well, I was back. I stared at it, not ready. I hadn't told anyone I still had it. Not even Julia, and she'd practically dragged me through the whole unpack your trauma phase when I left the army. I'd wanted to burn it a dozen times. Maybe I should have. The paper was thicker than it had any right to be. His handwriting was scratched in neat, deliberate lines he always wrote like he was filling out a flight log. Harper, if you're reading this, you went back. I don't know why, I don't know what made you. But I know one thing. You were braver than me the second you stepped away from that family with your dignity still intact. That sentence hit hard enough that I had to blink twice. Your sister will always be the town's sweetheart. Your mom will always find ways to make your choices sound like defiance. Brandon will pretend not to notice. And me? I didn't say enough when I should have. I let them make you small. You didn't break when they iced you out. You didn't lie to save face. And when it counted most, you covered for someone else's mistake because it was the right thing, even though it cost you everything. My grip on the letter tightened. I know you're angry. You should be. I was, too, once. But I stayed. I played along. You didn't. That makes you the strongest damn person I ever raised. I stopped reading. My throat was tight, but I didn't cry, not here. I folded the letter carefully and slid it back into my pocket. I didn't need to read the rest. Not now. I already knew what it said. I'd read it 100 times in my head since the funeral. I stood and looked at the dead fountain before walking around the building. From a distance, the auditorium looked like a chapel columns, arched entry, the whole small town takes itself too seriously. Aesthetic. Inside, I knew the room would be filled with the same people who'd watched me grow up. The same people who called me Bob Linwood's other daughter. The doors were still closed. No one at the front now. Just a couple of smokers off to the side, not paying attention. I slipped around them and leaned against the wall, out of sight. And I listened. A woman was speaking on stage. Her voice was clear, over-enunciated, and so familiar it made my spine crawl. And that's why I stand here today, not just proud of my position, but proud of the family that raised me. My father Robert Linwood was a man of honor, and today's event isn't just about remembering his service. It's about continuing his legacy. Colette. Her tone was straight out of a PR manual. Polished. Measured. Perfect for the town newspaper pull quote. She continued. Everything I've done in my career, in my service to this town, to this country, comes from the values he instilled in me: discipline, integrity, and courage. I bit the inside of my cheek. She said courage, like it was a ribbon she'd bought at Hobby Lobby and stapled to a scrapbook. I could practically see her gesturing with perfectly manicured hands. People clapped. Someone whistled. You'd expect the kind of wholesome crowd reaction if she'd just announced she'd cured cancer using local farm eggs. Then came the kicker. And though not everyone in this family took the same path, I believe we all carry his memory in our own way. Some through service, some through sacrifice, and some through distance. There it was. A dig, wrapped in a smile. Classic Colette. No one booed. No one objected. They didn't even know who the target was. I exhaled, slow and sharp, like I'd been punched in the ribs by memory. They never saw what happened out there. They never asked. They didn't want to. But one day, they would, whether they were ready or not. I stepped out from behind the column, let the doors swing open, and walked straight into the noise. The room was packed. Folding chairs filled every inch of floor space, backs pressed tight, elbows awkwardly tucked in. Banners hung from the rafters with phrases like honor, duty, legacy. In fonts that screamed, local printer with a military discount. A slideshow flickered above the stage, dad in uniform, dad fishing, dad smiling in that uncomfortable, I don't like cameras way. And right in the center of it all, Colette. She stood at the podium like she owned oxygen. Dark blue dress, pearls, and a delicate bun as she'd modeled for a campaign ad. She was mid-sentence as I found a spot near the back wall. He taught us that leadership doesn't start with rank. It starts with showing up for the people who count on you. Sure, unless those people were your younger sister. A man beside me shifted, then muttered. I didn't know she had a sibling. I didn't look at him. Colette sipped water as she'd just delivered a TED Talk. Then, she moved on to the awards portion. Her voice brightened just slightly, turning from reverent daughter to community leader. I'd like to take a moment to recognize the folks who made this possible: the Valemont Chamber, Mayor Wallace, and of course the Valemont Military Honors Board, who nominated Dad for this year's posthumous service commendation. Applause. A few people stood. The kind of performative appreciation that makes small-town ceremonies feel like off-brand Oscars. And finally, she said, flashing her pageant smile, we'd like to honor one more legacy today: the future of service. The next generation of leaders, like the cadets at the Arnett Regional Training Academy. Let's welcome our scholarship recipient Riley Monroe. The crowd clapped as a nervous teenager in stiff slacks climbed the stairs, wide-eyed and visibly sweating. I crossed my arms. Colette handed him a framed certificate with both hands, then placed her palm dramatically on his shoulder. Your service is just beginning, she said, meaningfully dripping. Make it count. Riley looked like he might pass out from a sincerity overdose. Then came the photo op. Flashbulbs. Hugs. The slow, excruciating rotation of people moving on and off the stage. Each name read like a checklist. Volunteers. Donors. Friends of Dad's from the hardware store. Nobody mentioned me. I was background noise. A shadow in the back of the hall. Colette kept smiling. She returned to the mic one last time. Before we close, I'd like to say this. When we think of legacy, we often think of medals, of service records, of official stories. But my father's legacy isn't just in what he did. It's in the people he inspired. And I stand here. She put her hand to her chest. As living proof of that. God. People clapped like she'd just solved world peace. Some guy up front even whistled. I didn't move. But my jaw clenched hard enough to hurt. I'd let her take the stage for years. I'd let her shape the story because I was too tired to correct it. I left to protect her, and she rewrote history without blinking. I looked at the screen above her, where a photo of Dad in uniform dissolved into one of him and Colette in high school cheer gear, hugging him like some Hallmark ad. You'd never guess he had 2 daughters. You'd never guess one had more combat hours than the other had PTA meetings. The crowd began to stir. The program was ending. People stood chatting and hugging, some wiping their eyes like it had all been touching. Colette stepped down from the podium and headed for the front row, where the mayor handed her another certificate as if she were collecting trophies. I walked toward the side aisle. A woman I didn't recognize turned as I passed. Oh, are you one of the cadets' parents? No, I said. I'm Harper Linwood. Her face changed like I'd just confessed to stealing a baby. Oh, she said quietly. I didn't know you were here. Most people didn't. She opened her mouth to say something else, then thought better. I walked past her and kept going. Someone fumbled with the sound system at the far end of the room and accidentally played the first note of God Bless America before killing it. The awkwardness lingered in the air like cheap cologne. I stepped out into the hallway as the front doors creaked open again. Not from the outside. From the opposite entrance. And everyone turned. I didn't follow the crowd. I turned toward the double doors because whoever just walked in made the room fall dead silent. Boots echoed on the polished floor. That cadence. Sharp, precise, not dress shoes or loafers. Real boots. Worn by someone used to walking through hell without blinking. And then he appeared. 4 stars on the shoulders. Uniform tailored within an inch of its life, General Maxwell Dean. You could practically hear the oxygen get sucked out of the room. He didn't walk in like a guest, he walked in like this was his ceremony and someone forgot to send the memo. Colette froze mid-handshake with the mayor. Her smile wavered, confused, and just a little bit scared. She scanned the crowd like she'd missed a briefing. No one had expected him. I sure as hell hadn't. General Dean was the kind of man who rarely left Washington unless cameras, dignitaries, or a plane were involved. What he wasn't known for. Crashing small-town memorial events in places like Valemont, Nebraska. He scanned the room once, expression unreadable, then started walking. Not toward the podium. Not toward the mayor. Toward the back. Toward me. People stepped aside without being asked. It was like watching a glacier move slow, inevitable, and impossible to stop. His eyes locked on mine. Cold steel, but not unkind. Colette caught on just a beat too late. She took a step toward him, half raising her hand. "General Dean," she said, pitch climbing. What an unexpected. He didn't even glance at her. Didn't slow down. Didn't blink. He walked straight past her, down the center aisle like it was a damn runway, and stopped 3 feet in front of me. And then he did something no one expected. He saluted. Straight posture, right hand up, palm out, crisp as a gunshot. "Ma'am," he said, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. "It's an honor to see you again." The air changed. You could feel it. All the snide whispers from earlier? Gone. Replaced by wide eyes, confused blinks, a few people gasping like they'd witnessed a resurrection. I didn't say anything. I nodded. Barely. General Dean dropped his salute and took a step closer. "You look well, Major Linwood." Major. Miss, not Miss. Not Colette's little sister. Major. That word did more to reset the temperature in that room than the HVAC system ever could. Behind me, someone muttered, "Wait, Major?" Dean heard it. He didn't react. He just looked me over with the kind of subtle appraisal that says, "I see what they don't." Then he turned to the crowd as if he remembered that other people existed. "Excuse the intrusion," he said, voice booming. "I was passing through and learned that the late Captain Linwood was being honored today. I served with him briefly in '98. I thought it appropriate to pay my respects." The lie was smooth. Flawless. He hadn't served with Dad, not once. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that he said it. Colette opened her mouth, probably to reclaim control of the narrative, but Dean kept going. "And when I saw that one of our finest officers was here as well, someone who gave far more than most ever will, I felt it was time the room acknowledged her presence." He looked back at me, then to the crowd. "This woman," he said, gesturing, "has led operations you'll never read about, has held lives in her hands, has made decisions no parade or plaque can capture." People stood not all at once. But a ripple started. First, a retired guy in an old Air Force jacket. Then, the local VFW crew. Then, one of the scholarship donors. Colette stood there, jaw tight, hands clenched in front of her like she couldn't decide if she was at a funeral or a roast. General Dean stepped back, hands behind his back now. "Carry on," he said like a closing prayer. Then he nodded at me again, turned, and walked right back out. No handshake. No selfies. No small talk. Just silence. And every eye in that hall followed me now, not her. I didn't move when the murmurs started, Colette's smile cracked, nor when my mother finally turned to look at me for the first time all day. She didn't say anything. Just looked like she was seeing me under a new kind of light. Not the prodigal daughter, not the one who couldn't settle down, not the inconvenience. Just someone the general had saluted. The room didn't roar. It didn't clap. But it shifted. You could feel it. The crowd suddenly wasn't sure who the main character was anymore. Some of the same people who'd barely nodded at me in the lobby were now whispering to each other, heads tilted toward me like I was some kind of ghost story that turned out to be real. A woman from the school board stood up and straightened her blazer like she was about to walk over and apologize for the last decade. I beat her to it by standing. Colette looked like she was going to step in front of me. Her mouth opened, but she hesitated. She must have realized that it's not the best time to keep playing Queen of the Day after a 4-star general calls someone ma'am and then gives a public lecture about heroism. I took a slow breath and walked straight down the aisle past her. Not brushing against her, not bumping shoulders, just around. Like she wasn't an obstacle. Or an opponent. Just another fixture in a room I'd already outgrown. The walk toward the front felt longer than it probably was. I could feel the eyes, the recalibrating, the internal rewrites. Everyone tried to reconcile the Harper Linwood they thought they knew with the one General Maxwell Dean had just saluted. Dad was near the front. He stood, too. Hands clenched. Jaw tight. But he gave me the slightest nod like he didn't know whether to be proud or embarrassed that this moment wasn't hers. The mayor, bless his clueless heart, fumbled toward me. "Miss Linwood, would you like to say a few words?" He meant it like an afterthought. A courtesy. I looked at the microphone. Then, rows of people hadn't even made room for me at the family pew earlier. "No," I said plainly. "I came here to honor my father. Not to interrupt the show." And then I turned. Found an empty seat near the aisle. I didn't ask permission. Didn't check if it was reserved. Just sat. Let the metal frame creak under me like it was exhaling, too. That seat gave me a perfect view of Colette, now back at the podium, trying to pick up where she left off. She blinked at her notes like they'd been written in another lifetime. Her voice cracked when she started again. You could almost hear the tightness in her throat. "Thank you all for being here today to honor our late father, Captain Willard Linwood. He was a man of courage." She was trying to sound composed, still polished, but the tremble in her fingers when she adjusted the mic betrayed her. She knew she'd lost control of the room. Not because anyone said it. Not because the spotlight moved. But when the general said, "Ma'am," everything else she'd rehearsed felt less critical. I crossed one leg over the other and leaned back just enough to watch who would pretend nothing had happened. Nobody moved. The same people who had smiled through Colette's introductions now sat straighter, quieter, like they'd forgotten which direction to clap. The ceremony was still technically in her hands, but the air wasn't. It had shifted. Everybody felt it. Colette stumbled her way through the rest of her speech. She thanked the town council, the VFW reps, and even the guy running the soundboard, but her voice cracked again when she tried to talk about our dad. "Captain Linwood served this country with dignity and strength," she said, staring down at her notes like they might dissolve if she blinked too hard. "And he loved this town. Deeply." That was the line that should have brought the house down. But the room just held its breath. No claps, no murmurs. Just chairs creaking and someone's throat clearing in the back. She knew it, too. Her mouth pressed into a thin line before she finally stepped away from the podium. The mayor tried to cover the awkwardness with a stiff thank you, waving her off stage like a student at a spelling bee who'd missed her word. He turned to the general, clearly hoping to redirect things. But General Dean didn't budge. He stood with his arms behind his back, staring straight ahead. So the mayor pivoted again, gesturing toward the slideshow they'd queued up pictures of Dad through the years. His wedding, fishing with Brandon, teaching Colette how to ride a bike. Not a single photo of me. I didn't expect one. But it still hit harder than I thought it would. I counted the seconds between slides, wondering if anyone else noticed the glaring omission. From the shift in a few faces, people glancing my way and then quickly looking down, I knew they did. Dad hadn't just disappeared from my life when he died. He'd been disappearing from their version of the story for years. Until today. Until a general showed up and said something that nobody in this family ever dared to say out loud. That maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the one who failed the family. The slideshow ended. A long silence followed. That's when General Dean moved. He stepped forward, not to the mic, not toward Colette but toward the front pew, where my mother was still sitting, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "Mrs. Linwood," he said, voice even. "You raised a remarkable daughter." The words floated into the air like a stone into still water. Ripples everywhere. She looked up, startled. Then confused. Then furious. But she didn't say a word. The general nodded, then turned toward me. "Captain Linwood used to tell me stories. About his daughters. Both of them. But only one made it into his final letter." The room locked eyes on me again. He didn't ask if I wanted the letter. He pulled it from his jacket, still sealed in Dad's handwriting. He walked down the aisle past the pews, past Colette, and handed it to me directly. I took it without a word. The paper felt heavier than it should have. I glanced down. My name was the only thing written on the envelope. Just Harper. And behind me, the room was utterly silent for the first time that day. I slipped the letter into my coat pocket without opening it and stood up, not because I was ready, but because it felt like everyone was waiting to see if I would. The air in the room had that strange, charged stillness. Like after a car crash, when nothing moves but your pulse. General Dean didn't go back to his seat. He turned to the crowd, adjusting his uniform like he was about to issue a field report. He didn't touch the mic. He didn't need it. "Most of you don't know me," he said. "But I knew Captain Nathan Linwood well. I served with him overseas. And I served with his daughter, too. Not Colette. The other one." Every eye in the room landed on me. A few mouths fell open. One woman in the back dropped her program. "Harper Linwood was under my command in Yemen," he said. "I won't break protocol and share classified details. But what I will say is this: if not for her decisions during Operation Leviathan, more than 60 men and women wouldn't have made it home." A loud shift rippled across the room. I spotted our high school principal in the fourth row. He blinked like he'd just been hit with a bucket of cold water. "2 seats down, Mrs. Rudder from the post office clutched her pearls so tightly that I was amazed they didn't snap. "Captain Linwood received a Distinguished Service Cross," he went on. "She refused a ceremony. She didn't want a headline. She wanted to protect the others involved, even when her personal reputation took the fall." Mom's face twitched. Colette's posture turned rigid as stone. "She didn't just serve, she shielded people who didn't deserve shielding. That includes someone close to this community. Someone who made a critical error in a supply chain transfer. One that could have cost lives." I didn't flinch. But I didn't move either. She took responsibility. Quietly, willingly. And it nearly ended her career. But she didn't speak up because she thought it would hurt her family more than it would help herself. There were whispers now. A few people leaned toward each other, murmuring half-formed questions and guesses. Every one of them was wrong. "She was not disgraced," Dean continued. "She was honorable, she still is." He turned toward me and gave a slight nod. I don't know what face I was making, but my knees were locked so tight I felt them trembling under the fabric of my pants. "You want to know what kind of soldier she was?" he said, voice sharper now. "She's the kind who could have gone to Washington, to Langley, even NATO. And she walked away because she knew silence was sometimes the last act of loyalty she had left." Silence swept through the auditorium like a slow-burning fuse. I hadn't looked at Colette yet. I knew if I did, something would crack. But then I heard her shift. That subtle scrape of heels turning slightly. I looked over. She wasn't crying. She wasn't apologizing. She was glaring at me. Like I'd stolen something that belonged to her. The worst part was she still didn't get it. She didn't understand that I'd protected her. She didn't realize the fallout I took was hers to begin with. General Dean stepped away now. Quiet. Measured. He returned to his seat like he'd just given a weather update. I stood frozen, not because I was unsure what to say, but because I wasn't sure it was worth saying anything. But then Dad's face flashed through my mind. He used to look at me when I was little as if I could take apart the entire lawnmower and put it back together better than the factory ever did. I pulled the envelope from my coat. The flap tore clean. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in my dad's blocky, all-caps handwriting. He always printed as if he were still filling out forms in the army. It read, "Harper, if you're reading this, I didn't get to say it to your face. I saw everything. I knew. I saw you carry it. I saw you give up your clearance. I saw you cover for your sister, even when she pretended you didn't exist. I didn't say anything because I was scared. Maybe keeping the family whole was better than being honest. That was my cowardice, not yours. I am proud of you. More than you know. More than I ever said. You are the daughter I would follow into battle and the one I trust to lead others out of it. Don't let them erase you. Dad." It didn't matter how many people were in that room. When I folded the letter and slid it back into my coat, only 2 people mattered: me, Father, and the girl I'd been trying to protect. And I wasn't going to keep quiet for either of them anymore. I didn't ask for permission, I took the mic because it was mine to hold. The weight of what I was about to say wasn't new. I'd carried it across continents, through dust storms, and inside half-lit barracks where sleep came in shifts and trust was currency. I had memorized every version of silence this story lived in. But now, standing in front of the people who thought they knew me, I decided they would know the truth instead. It was Yemen. 2018, I said, my voice steady. Operation Griffin. You've never heard of it because that's the point. Classified. We weren't even officially there. I saw confusion flicker across faces: me mother's, the dean's, even Colette's, though hers twitched more in irritation than curiosity. I was with Echo Division. I continued. We had 2 primary objectives: escort a supply convoy through contested territory, then extract a foreign national asset. It was supposed to be clean. I let the silence drag a second longer. I needed them to feel the sharpness of the word supposed. But nothing about that day went right. We were ambushed 17 miles out. The intel was garbage. Terrain was boxed. We couldn't get evac without bringing heat onto the entire region. I made a call. I split the unit. One woman in the front row, the same who earlier whispered I'd been dishonorably discharged, was now leaning forward. I led a team north, carrying out the decoy maneuver. It worked. The others got out, but my team didn't. I didn't blink when I said it. I couldn't afford to. We lost 3 men. Good men. One was barely 22. I carried the last one, Staff Sergeant Merrick, half a mile on foot before the second evac bird circled back. He died anyway. There it was. The weight. I looked straight at the general now. He knew. His nod was microscopic. But that's not why I left. I let the following sentence sit on my tongue before releasing it. I left because of logistics. That got their attention. Even Mom squinted at me like I'd grown a second head. 3 weeks before the op, a shipment of tactical gear was delayed. Nothing major. A box of reinforced FAKes improved first aid kits. There was a mix-up with the distribution manifest. Somehow, one requisition sheet was signed in duplicate, bumping our unit from the delivery chain. That sheet had my sister's name on it. Heads turned toward Colette. Her smile flattened instantly. She was stationed at Logistics Command, Fort Jensen. She didn't pack the boxes, sure, but she signed off on a priority reroute to another division. I recognized her handwriting. I covered it up. My mother gasped. Not a dramatic gasp, just a sudden, instinctive intake of disbelief. I filed it under admin error. Told the internal review it was mine. Took the hit. Because at the time, I figured she had kids, a husband, a reputation. She wasn't built for scrutiny. Colette's eyes were locked on me now, mouth tight. I told myself it wasn't intentional. That maybe it wouldn't have mattered, but I knew it did. Merrick might have lived with that extra kit, so might the other 2. I could feel my voice shaking beneath the surface, but I didn't stop. After the inquiry, I resigned my commission. Quietly. General Dean tried to talk me out of it, said I still had a future. But I couldn't carry both the silence and the guilt, so I left. The auditorium was dead silent. I moved back to Valemont. Lived in my truck for 3 months while working construction. Didn't tell anyone. When Dad found out, he drove 6 hours just to sit next to me and not say a word. Just handed me coffee and waited. Now, I turned to face Colette fully. You got promoted 2 months later. I said nothing. Again. When Dad got sick, I offered to help. You said you had it handled. I stayed away. I folded my arms. And yet, somehow, I'm still the embarrassment. No one laughed this time. What I didn't say but everyone in that room now understood was that Colette hadn't just failed a line on a form. She had been protected while I had burned, and I let it happen. I let it happen because I thought silence was the price for peace. But standing here, I realized it never bought peace. It only lets the wrong story win. Colette's chair scraped back hard, and for the first time all day, she walked straight toward me without an audience to impress. Colette stopped just a foot away, her jaw set like she was bracing for recoil. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. You think you know everything, but you don't. You never did. I didn't flinch. She went on, eyes darting toward the lingering crowd before locking on me again. That Yemen report. The one that never made it past the audit. That was me. I screwed up the logistics manifest. She laughed without humor. You cleaned it up, covered for me, you always did. I let her words sit. Not because I was shocked, but because I already knew. Every word. The error in the convoy manifest was that the food rations were miscounted and the 2 trucks were rerouted and left without protection. I didn't report it. I adjusted the logs, filed under my name, and took the fallout silently. Because family doesn't get left behind at least, that's what I believed. Now, she was facing it for the first time, eyes glassy but defiant. You made it worse by staying quiet, she said. People think I'm perfect. Untouchable. And that's your fault too. That almost made me laugh. You think I did that for you? I did it because Dad was dying, and I thought maybe one of us could still make him proud. Colette's face changed at the word, Dad. I saw something crack. She wiped her cheek like it had been an itch, but I knew better. I never asked you to cover for me. No, I said, you just let me. Behind us, voices stirred. The event had ended, the crowd drifting out, awkward with their small talk and thin smiles. Colette's husband lingered by the refreshment table, pretending not to watch. Mom was pretending she hadn't seen us slip away. This moment was our first honest one since high school, maybe longer. You think I had it easy, she said. That being the perfect daughter meant things came easy. She stepped back and folded her arms. But I spent my whole life scared I'd be exposed. That someone would dig too deep. I crossed my arms, too. And what? Did you hate me for being free? For leaving? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. You left and did everything I never could, she said. And no matter what you say, I was jealous. I still am. The air between us shifted. It is not quite warm, but it is not cold anymore. She looked away first. You're not the screw-up, Harper, I am. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Yeah, I said. But only one of us paid for it. And that was the whole damn truth. I stepped past her without waiting for permission, like I'd stepped off that base years ago done asking for clearance. Colette spun on her heel to follow, and by the time I reached the back hallway behind the stage, our parents were already there. Mom stood stiff in a corner like someone was about to serve her court papers. Dad was next to her, looking like he'd aged another 5 years since breakfast. You had to do this now? Mom snapped before I could say anything. In front of everyone? I faced her fully. Yeah. Because behind closed doors is exactly how all of this got buried in the first place. Colette was behind me now, arms crossed but quiet for once. Dad stepped forward. Harper, your mother's just tired? Embarrassed? I cut in. Let's not pretend this caught anyone off guard. You knew, both of you. You just didn't want to deal with what it meant. Dad didn't deny it. I turned to Colette. You want to say it now, out loud? She shifted her weight as it hurt. I rerouted the kits. I signed it. I caused the delay. And you covered for me. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even regret. But it was the first honest sentence she'd said in years. Mom exhaled hard like the truth had taken the air from her lungs. You let your sister take the fall, for that? Colette didn't flinch. I panicked. I didn't think it would cost anything. When it did, Harper had already cleaned it up. What was I supposed to downfail the mission? You were supposed to take responsibility, I said. But you never did. Not once. Until now. Dad's face was stone. Why didn't you tell us, Harper? Would it have mattered? I asked. You would have protected her anyway. I just made it easier for everyone. No, he said quietly. You made it harder for yourself. There was a long pause. Then Mom finally sat on the armrest of a chair, like the truth had knocked her legs out. You always thought I was ashamed of you, she said. But I wasn't. I just didn't understand you. You didn't try, I replied. You saw a uniform on your older daughter and thought it meant safe. You saw one on me and thought it meant trouble. I saw someone I didn't know how to parent, she whispered. That one landed. Colette walked to a small table and picked up a water bottle, twisting the cap even though she didn't drink. I didn't hate you, Harper, she said. But I did resent you. You left. You didn't stay behind and smile through the expectations. No, I said. I went to war. Dad stepped between us now. What do you want, Harper? The question was blunt. Not cold, just clear. I looked at him, then at all of them. I don't want an apology, I said. I don't need a hug or a plaque. I want my name back. I want my record corrected. I want the truth, on paper, in ink, the same way it was taken from me. He nodded. You'll have it. I'll talk to the board myself. Colette looked like she was chewing glass. But she didn't argue. I'll sign the statement, she said. Everything. You can submit it to the review committee. It still wasn't forgiveness. But it was accountability. And that was something. From the hallway, we heard footsteps, people filtering out, programs in hand, buzz of confusion still in the air. I turned to go. But before I left, I looked at Colette one more time. You said earlier that I made you look untouchable. You ever think maybe that's what made me invisible? She didn't answer. But she didn't walk away either. In the main lobby, the mayor gave me a sheepish nod. General Dean was already gone. I didn't need him to stay. I'd said what I came to say. And this time, no one told me to leave. I walked past the flags without slowing down, letting the cold air hit my face like a reset I didn't know I needed. Colette caught up a minute later, heels crunching on the gravel. She stood beside me in silence, arms crossed, eyes squinting into the low winter sun. We watched as people filtered out of the auditorium, everyone pretending not to look our way but failing miserably. I didn't expect you to come, she finally said. I did, I replied. Didn't expect the part where my name was erased like I never existed. She shifted uncomfortably. That wasn't my call. No, I said. But you didn't object either. Her jaw tensed, then unclenched. You want me to say I'm sorry? I want you to tell the truth. She turned toward me. The truth? You mean the version where you're the hero and I'm the liar? No, I said calmly. The version where I was the one who took the fall, and you let me. Colette blinked like she hadn't expected me to go straight for the artery. That was 10 years ago. And yet, here we are. The silence stretched. I kept my eyes on her. I covered for you. I shut my mouth, took the hit, and walked away from everything. And you, Colette, you got a promotion. I didn't ask you to do that, she said sharply. Number. But you didn't stop me either. Colette took a shaky breath. I was scared, Harper. I made a mistake. You had a career, you were going places, and I was. Sloppy, I finished for her. You falsified logistics records. People nearly died because of it. Her shoulders dropped. I fixed it, I said. Quietly. No medals. No citations. Just a file marked with a black stamp and a lot of silence. You knew the review would come down hard, so you played the family first card. I played along. She didn't deny it. What do you want from me now? She asked. Forgiveness? I laughed, not unkindly. God, no. I'm not here for forgiveness. I'm here because if one more person calls you the hero of this family without knowing the truth, I'll throw up on their dress blues. That made her smirk, barely. I pressed on. You always needed to win. That was your thing. Be better, louder, shinier. And you are. You've got the house, the family, the speeches. Your mom's pride and dad's distraction. But I had something you didn't. What? She asked, voice small. Integrity, I said. Until I gave that up for you. Colette's face pinched in pain. You don't owe me an apology, Colette, I added. You owe it to yourself. Because the longer you wear a title you didn't earn, the less it means. She looked away, eyes glassy. I didn't think you'd ever say it out loud. I didn't either, I admitted. She swallowed hard. Why now? I exhaled. Because I've spent 10 years hiding in the shadow of someone who built her pedestal out of my silence. And now that silence is over. From behind us, we heard slow footsteps. Mom. Arms folded, lips tight. She stopped next to us, but didn't say anything. You heard? I asked, not looking at her. I suspected, she said. Your father always said something felt off about that last year. And yet, you believed her over me. I said flatly. Mom didn't deny it. I believed the version that made things easier. Not better, I said. Just quieter. She nodded once. Colette spoke again, voice hoarse. I'm not proud of what I did. I wish I could go back. You can't, I said. But you can stop pretending it didn't happen. She stared at the flagpole across the parking lot like it might have answers. What now? I don't know, I admitted. Maybe nothing. Maybe you keep your podium and I keep my file. But we both know who earned what. Colette took a long breath and nodded. Okay. And next time someone says I'm just bitter, I added, feel free to correct them. That made her chuckle. Yeah, I will. Mom finally stepped in. I want to say something. We both turned toward her. I was wrong, she said. About a lot. About you, about what mattered. I pushed you out because it was easier than facing what we'd become. I blinked. That was not expected. I can't undo what's done, she added. But I can stop pretending we're still the family we were. And maybe try to build something better. I looked at her. That'll take more than a Sunday dinner. I know, she said. But maybe it starts with one. Colette looked between us. You sure? No, I said. But I'm willing. A long silence passed. Then Mom said, so, we're just gonna stand here in the cold, or someone gonna drive? Without a word, we all turned toward the car. Not to escape the past but to stop letting it drive. I opened the passenger door, tossed my coat in first, and paused because no one was walking ahead of me for the first time in years. The invitation came printed in gold foil, heavier than it needed to be, like it wanted to ensure I took it seriously. I didn't hang it on the fridge. I left it on the counter for a week before I said yes. The auditorium at the academy was smaller than I remembered, but that might have just been my shoulders finally relaxing. My boots echoed louder than expected as I walked toward the stage, past rows of cadets sitting straighter than truth. They called my name without a pause, without a question, without asterisks. I stepped onto the stage and accepted the plaque. Not for the medal, but for the words. With honor, Captain Harper Linwood. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I stood still while they clapped and let the sound be enough. In the crowd, I saw General Dean arms crossed, head tilted slightly like a nod. I scanned the front row. It wasn't Mom who caught my eye, it was Colette, sitting quietly, not in uniform. She wasn't on stage. She wasn't at the podium. She was just there, watching. It said more than anything she could have spoken. Afterwards, we gathered in the reception hall. Small talk hummed around plates of dry cake and watered-down punch. Colette approached, hands in her pockets, eyes tired but clearer than I'd ever seen them. She didn't make a speech. She just said, "You earned it." I shrugged. "Took long enough." "Worth the wait," she replied, then added, "I sat up front for a reason." I nodded once. I noticed. We didn't hug, we didn't cry. We just stood there like sisters who'd finally stopped lying. Mom joined us a few minutes later, quieter than usual. She didn't say much either, just rested a hand on my shoulder like she meant it. Someone asked for a group photo. I didn't step back, neither did they. When I left, I walked alone. But not the same kind of alone I used to carry. There was space now, space between me and the silence. And it felt like something I could live in. Later that night, I hung the plaque on my wall not because I needed proof, but because I'd finally decided I deserved it. And for once, the seat at the front didn't belong to someone else. As I sat alone that night, the plaque catching soft light from the hallway, I didn't replay the applause or the speeches. I thought about dust in my lungs, sand under my boots, the names I still carried, and the silence that had once protected the wrong things. Truth doesn't fix everything, but it clears the air. And sometimes, clearing the air is the only way to breathe again. If stories like this hit something real for you, messy truths, quiet revenge, and family drama that doesn't tie up in a neat little bow, go ahead and hit subscribe. We've got more true-to-life revenge stories coming your way, and trust me, they don't get any cleaner.